So I told you guys I wasn't going to be here today, and at this point you should have several things in front of you. You should have this page, the quadratic stained glass window project page. You should also have a sheet of graph paper, and you should also have something that says quadratic stained glass window project tables. And you should lastly have your list of points that you created yesterday in class, and that should be given back to you. And you were stuck with these 10 points, even if you decide you don't like them after you find out what you're doing with them, you're stuck with them. And I do have a copy of them, so I will know if you do change them, because I have your original actually. So you guys got a copy, so you don't even have the one that you can erase. I gave you a photocopy of your original one. So your objective, what you're going to be doing for your project, is you are going to determine the equation of 10 quadratics given a vertex and a point. This is exactly what we've been doing in class, and I'm going to write this. It's what we've been doing in section 3.2. It's what I taught on Tuesday, and what I taught on Wednesday, and what you guys are finishing up in class today. So that's all you're really doing. But then you're going to do a little bit more, and you're actually going to graph the quadratics, and you're going to create a stained glass window. So this project is due on Tuesday, October 10th at the beginning of class. That gives you about a week and a half, a little over a week and a half to work on it. The first thing you need to do, however, before we actually get into the graphing part of it, the first thing you need to do is fill in your table and get all of that information. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, and then I'll talk to you on Friday about like the graph and stuff like that. So first step is you need to create a list of 10 points with the following domain or following information. So based on our domain and range, we have already done this. This is again what you did in class yesterday. So now what you're going to do, and I'm going to explain these in detail in a minute, is we're going to use point number 1 as a vertex and point number 2 as another point on the line to determine the A value, which is what we've been learning how to do. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the table, and I've a list of points here. So I have, you can see my points 1 through 4 that I created. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my table, and in these boxes 1 through 4, I'm going to write these points. These points are going to be my vertex points. So my first vertex point is going to be 3, -10. My second vertex point is going to be -5, 11. My third vertex point is going to be 10, 3. And then my fourth vertex point is -7, -1. So I currently have the vertex for 4 of my parabolas that I'm going to be graphing. And then to get the second point on, or to get the other point, because remember what we've been learning is to find the A value, and to get it into vertex form, I have to have a vertex and a point. That's literally what we've been doing in section 3.2. So the way this is going to work is for graph number 1 here. So for graph number 1, your vertex is point number 1, but your point that you're going to use is point number 2. So my point is going to be -5, 11. And that's what it says in your instructions. If you go back and look at those, it says that you're going to use point number 1 as your vertex, and point number 2 is the other point on the graph. And then for our second graph, we're going to use this second point as our vertex, and we're going to use our third point as our vertex. I'm sorry, as our other point on our graph. So I'm going to use the point 10, 3. And then for for my graph number 3, my vertex is 10, 3, obviously. The other point on my graph is -7, -1. So this will kind of almost be like a connect the dot picture, because you will have 2 graphs that are going to go through each of these points. So your main goal, kind of what you need to work on today if you have time, and what you're going to focus on tomorrow as well, is actually just filling in this part here, the vertex and the point for all of your points. When you get to the very end for point 10, you're going to use the ordered pair 3, -10 as the other point for that one. I'm going to show you that in a second. But when you need to fill in this table, the first 2 columns at least. So notice, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you're still not sure, whatever was point 2 is going to, the vertex number 2 is the point of the one before it. Vertex number 3 is the point in the one before it. Vertex number 4 is the point in the one before it. So that's what your first 2 columns should look like. And then you guys know how to go ahead and find A. Remember to find A in case you forgot. You're not going to want to do this on this sheet of paper. You need to do, if you keep reading your instructions, it says that you need to show all of your work neatly on another piece of paper and turn it in. But since I'm showing you this on my screen, I'm going to show it to you on this page. So for problem number 1, to find my vertex form, I'm going to use the formula y equals a times x minus h squared. I know that y is going to be 11 because that was my point, equals a times x is going to be -5, minus h is going to be -3 squared, and then minus 10. So that's going to give me 11 equals a times -8 squared minus 10. Again, this is my problem. This is not your problem, so you probably should not be writing this down. Hopefully you're not. I'm just working through it for you so you can see what we're doing. So 11 equals a times -8 squared is going to be 64 minus 10. And then to get a by itself, I need to add 10 to both sides. So then I get 21 equals a times 64. And my very final step to get a completely alone is to divide by 64 on both sides, and I end up with a equals 21 over 64. So you are probably going to get some pretty ugly fractions here, and that is okay. So this is my a value for this problem. By the way, that doesn't reduce. That's why I left it alone. So that means the next thing I would do is I would go to my vertex form, and I would write that in based on my equation that I came up with. So if you can focus on getting that part of it done, that's going to be the biggest thing. On Friday, I'll talk about how you get the standard form. You guys know at this point how to get your domain and range. Like, that is something that you are aware of how to do. So you could go ahead and fill in that. But again, on Friday, I'll talk to you about how to get it into standard form. Okay, so the next thing we're about to do is just remember that my first vertex was 3, -10. So that means that when I go graph number 10 down here, whatever my 10th point is that I come up with, that's going to be my 10th that's my 10th vertex. But the point that goes with that is the ordered pair 3, -10, because this was, remember, the very first point that I had. So that was my very first vertex, so it's my very last point. So by the time that all this project is due, this entire page should be filled in, both the front and the back side of it. So I'm looking at currently the back side of it. All of it should be completed. You should have 10 different equations, and some of these equations are going to have some pretty ugly a values. Remember, you're not allowed to change your points. You already picked your points. They're set in stone. You're not allowed to do that. So you're stuck with what you got. I'm sorry. But it's going to turn out and look really cool in the end. So I'm really excited about how the projects are going to end up. So going back to looking at our information page about the project, so step number 2 in our direction should make a little more sense because we used point 1 as the vertex and point 2 is another point on the quadratic, that should say quadratic, not line, to determine the a value of the graph. And once you have the a value, complete the rest of the row in the table for that equation. We talked about that, and again on Friday I will talk to you about how to get it into standard form. Then after you've got all of your graphs, you're going to accurately draw the parabola on the graph by using a graphing calculator to determine 3 other points on the parabola. So when you graph your parabolas, you will have a total of 5 points. When you graph them, you will have a total of 5 points. You will have the vertex, which you know. You will have the other point on the graph that you have come up with based on what you're in your table. And then you're going to use your calculator to find a couple other points. Now, those points are not going to be pretty. They're going to be decimals and stuff, and that's okay. We just want your graphs to be as accurate as possible. And you're just going to continue this process over and over and over again. And after all 10 parabolas have been drawn, then you're basically going to have a graph with a bunch of parabolas all over it, but it's going to create like a stained glass window effect. And you're going to color each section of the graph to create that stained glass window. So just so you know what your requirements are, each row in the table must be complete for each set of ordered pairs. So the whole table has to be filled in. All graphs have to be drawn on the graph paper provided. If you need extra graph paper, I have that. That's not a big deal. All of your work must be shown neatly on a separate sheet of paper and turned in with the final project. I need this organized. Okay, that's the big thing. I need it organized. Remember, you have graph numbers. Okay, you have graph numbers, so use those as your organizing your work that you're turning in. I want to be able to, if I need to look at your equation for graph number 5, I want to be able to find it. Okay, so make sure that it's organized well. And then all sections of the graph must be colored with a colored pencil, crayon, or marker. I do have all of those available if you need them. And then the last thing is what has to be turned in. When you turn in your final project, this has to be stapled together. You need your list of 10 points, and it must have my signature. It will be the copy that I gave you. You need your work that's organized, your answer table that's completed, and your window that is colored in. The bottom down here, we have our grading section. So when I'm grading it, you're going to make sure that the student, you correctly calculate the A value for each of the parabolas. That's worth 20 points. You're going to correctly find the vertex and the standard form of each quadratic. That's also worth 20 points. You're going to correctly identify the domain and range in interval notation. That is incredibly important. Notice I'm asking for the domain and range in interval notation. Interval notation is the one that uses parentheses or brackets. Depends on if it's less than or equal to. So, and then all work has to be turned in and organized. So that means this all work has to be turned in and organized is talking about all of this, this list of things that you have to have. And then all quadratics are accurately graphed, and all of the sections of the graph are neatly colored, and that's where you're going to get your 100 points, and this will count as a test grade. Just as a reminder, this project is due on Tuesday, October 10th at the beginning of class. So that's giving you, again, about a week and a half, a little over a week and a half to be exact, to get it done, which is plenty of time. So you will have you'll have class time obviously today to work on it if you need to. Remember that your homework is due tomorrow as well, but if you need class time today to work on that, you can start on it, and then tomorrow you'll have a little bit of class time too if you choose to use it for that. So a couple reminders for you. So a couple reminders for you. First of all, on Friday you have a factoring test. So all of this is about Friday. Every bit of this is about Friday. On Friday you have a factoring test. On Friday your homework 3.2 is due. And that is problems 3 through 6, 11, 12, and then 14 through 20. Remember I told you could omit problem 13. And then 7 through 10 on the supplemental assignment is also due. All of that on Friday. Last thing, please make sure that you are here on time and ready to go tomorrow as soon as the bell rings, because since tomorrow, Friday, is a pep rally schedule, we're going to be a little short on time, and I've got to teach 3.3 super quickly so you can have some time to work on that, because you're going to have calculators for 3.3. All right, be nice to the substitute, and I will see you guys on Friday.